In 1962, the United States government enlists the help of mutants with superhuman abilities to stop a malicious dictator who is determined to start World War III. This is my review of X-Men First Class. Back in 2011, there were people that were worried about this movie, and that's because 2 films before this movie, there was X-Men 3: The Last Stand, and everybody didn't like that movie. Well, pretty much everybody. I mean, including me as well. Like, I didn't like that movie at all. And then X-Men Origins Wolverine came out, and a lot of people didn't like that either. I mean, I thought there were some cool parts during that movie, but yeah, overall, it was a terrible movie. So people had the right to be worried about this movie, and I saw it back in 2011, and I gotta tell you guys that X-Men First Class was the right movie, like the first step towards the road of glory, like the first step back into the road of glory for the X-Men franchise. The good points. I think the reason this movie was great and stepped back on the road to glory was because of the directing from Matthew Vaughn. Now, before this movie, Matthew Vaughn directed Kick-Ass, which was another comic book movie, and I really liked Kick-Ass. And because of his directing, I think he brought the X-Men films back to form, because in the last 2 X-Men films, X-Men The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine, it didn't really feel like an X-Men movie. Like, you had the X-Men characters in it, but it didn't feel like an X-Men movie. While in this one, it felt more of an X-Men movie than the last 2 X-Men films that were there before it. I thought the cast that it had for this movie was great, and most of them did a good job. I thought the best parts were played by James McAvoy, who played young Professor X, Michael Fassbender, who played young Magneto, Jennifer Lawrence, who played young Mystique, and Kevin Bacon, who played the main villain in this movie. I can't remember his character's name, but he was the main villain in this movie. And when I was going into this movie back in 2011, I didn't know Kevin Bacon was in this movie, so when I saw him, I was like, wow, that's Kevin Bacon. I thought the writing was good as well, because the movie took place during the early 60s when the Cold War was happening, and this movie takes place during like a huge event during the Cold War. I also like the writing because they showed us like the beginning of this rivalry between Professor X and Magneto, and like what their ideologies were like back then during the 60s. Because you see at first that they're really good friends with each other, like they like debate with each other back then about like their ideologies and which one of them was right. I also like the revenge story in this movie with young Magneto, like he wants to kill the person that killed his parents. Yeah, I forgot to mention in the beginning that I watched this movie a week ago because I wanted to remember what happened before I saw X-Men Days of Future Past. But I realized something that I didn't remember the first time around, and that's that the production costume designs were really good. The sets and the costumes that the actors and extras were and made you feel like you were in this 60s period during the Cold War. The editing and pacing were good because it kept with the tone of the movie, and it also kept with the amount of time that each scene had. Because most of the scenes that were in this movie I thought had enough time to have development. I thought the soundtrack was good because it elevated some of the action scenes, because there were some action scenes where I didn't really like, but I liked those action scenes that I didn't like because the soundtrack behind it like elevated it to like keep your attention. There were also some visual effects that I found fascinating because they looked very realistic. And the final thing I'll say is that the ending of this movie is really cool because you can see like from this point like where the rest of the X-Men movies will go, like onto like the first X-Men. The bad points. One of the things I didn't like about this movie was the romance of it, because the romance was between 2 pairs. One of those pairs was mostly Beast and Mystique. Like, you see like how they got to know each other, but it seemed like it was rushed, and I think the reason it was rushed was because they didn't spend that much time on it, and I thought that was one of the points they should have developed to make it seem like they were in this romantic relationship because of the way they rushed it. It didn't seem like they would be in it. And other romances between young Professor X and the CIA agent played by Rose Byrne. Now, I thought that this relationship was really rushed because, okay, maybe a minor spoiler or whatever, but you find out at the end that they have feelings for one another, and it's like out of nowhere. It's like, whoa, what? Because Rose Byrne's character barely has any screen time in this movie, and the scenes that included Rose Byrne and James McAvoy, it didn't seem like they were like getting to know each other like a lot. I mean, there were some scenes, but it didn't like seem it was going the way where they were gonna have a romantic relationship. There were some elements of Mystique's character that I didn't believe because, well, I mean, there were some stuff because this is like before Mystique was this badass person. But there were just some things about her character, in this movie anyway, that I didn't like, and I can't really explain it. Like, it's nothing that I don't want to spoil, but it's something that is off about this character in the movie. Like I said in the good points, I thought that there were some visual effects moments where I thought that it really looked realistic on screen, but overall the visual effects weren't that good because there were like many parts where it was like, wow, that doesn't really look realistic at all. And when that happens, it brings me out of the movie. And remember in the good points I said that there were some action scenes that I liked because the soundtrack elevated it since like the action was bad. Well, yeah, some action scenes weren't that good in my opinion. So my rating for this movie is a 3.5 out of 4 stars. I think it's a movie that you should see, especially if you're a comic book fan, especially if you're a fan of the X-Men movies, because it's a X-Men movie that brings the X-Men franchise back to form after the terrible X-Men movies like X-Men First Class, X-Men The Last Stand, and X-Men Origins Wolverine. And don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything because I want you to enjoy the movie for yourself. And other than that, that's it.